All right, I'm coming in fresh. I'm coming in hot. You ready? You ready for this? This week on the Eldritch Lorecast.
This is a disaster. We can't do this.
Are you not a real D&D fan?
Wow.
And I will get a visit from either the FCC or the law enforcement people.
Let's get over Turbo Dork, man. What does Turbo Dork do? What do they do over there at Turbo Dork?
They're a lot faster than Slow Dork.
All you gotta do is get yourself a dad.
That the SRD 5.2 for Dungeons & Dragons will be arriving today.
All that and more right now. It was magical. It's like I was casting a spell, is what I was.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the Eldritch Lorecast. This is the #1 tabletop RPG podcast in all the realms, bar none. Old-timey box 'em all. And I'll probably lose because I can just imagine Shawn Merwin with like a scotch in like 3X bottle, like down in it and then coming up, and then that'd be a thing. We'd sell tickets. Anyway, my name's Ben Byrne. If you've never listened to this before, you're probably confused, but this is an RPG podcast, I swear. I'm joined, as always, by Shawn Merwin, James Hake, returning this week, Dael Kingsmill. Dael, how's your trip going?
Going really well, thank you so much. I've done so many things. I hung out with the MCDM team and got to play the very near finished version of Draw Steel. So that was a lot of fun. Over 3 days too. So it was like some extended play got to happen. And that was pretty exciting and fun. I've done Disneyland, I've done puppet festivals. There's so many things happening and I'm all up in them. Witch market.
Is this more of a holiday or a work trip for you, would you say? Or a bit of both? Column A, column B?
A little of both. Little both.
How does this rate on the scale of like trips that you've taken?
Oh my God.
Not asking you to like call anyone out or anything, but
I'm having a great time. I don't know where I would rank. I'm trying to think how many times I've been here. If this was a YouTube video, where would it rank?
Yeah.
I think it's safely, like, as I am still in the thrill of it, I can say right now, gotta be at least #2. #1 space is taken by that time I came to the US and just kept getting into Scooby-Doo shenanigans by accident. That was great. That was a great trip.
Oh yeah, with the key? I think you told that story once
That was
before.
that trip, yeah.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
The first time we ever met in person, Dael, was in LA. It was in Hollywood for the Stream of Avernus thing in 2019.
Yes.
Little did we know how much the world would change. And I think it was, in fact, it was our fateful game, you, me, and Clinton Travis McElroy on stream, plunged the world into darkness, I think, is what happened immediately following.
I think it has to be.
Well, that was that Descent into Avernus? They were launching that book, and then there was a whole event going on. I miss those events. They did one, for Tomb of Annihilation, Descent into Avernus, and then COVID happened?
No. It was Tomb of Annihilation, it was Waterdeep, and then it was Avernus, and then COVID happened.
Right.
They were getting ready to do the one for the Cold North. What do you call it?
Icewind Dale.
Icewind Dale. That was the one that they were all planned for and then had to cancel.
Adam Carnivale has a fun story around that and D&D is for nerds, but I'm not going to tell that story because it's not mine to tell. Shawn, you seem to travel a lot for work.
I do.
Do you enjoy the travel, like to go to conventions? Because you seem to get around to a lot of conventions and things. Usually is where I hear about you traveling.
As someone who works from home and has for 30 some years, it is the time to get out and meet folks who do the same thing I do and meet fans and meet other interested gamers. So yes, it's always great until it hits that point where it's not. And sometimes that's an hour in. Sometimes that could be a whole week could go by. And then sometimes people come and invade your home on work trips. And that just gets a little weird.
That's true. It did feel a little weird, just kind of Dante and I one morning, just like rocking up at, 9 a.m. or something and just like breaking into the Merwin household and like taking our shoes. I was like, this feels invasive. Should we have knocked? Well, we're here now.
There's still a Dante-shaped indentation in the one chair we have.
Gotcha, where he set up to do work.
It's now Dante's chair. We have dubbed it Dante's chair, even though he was only there for a week.
That's fantastic. James Hake, what about yourself? Do you enjoy traveling around for conventions or for work?
Man, I mean, I love to travel. I love going places. And I don't have a fear of airplanes like Dael does, but I don't like them very much, man. I think any flight past about the 3-hour mark starts to deal psychic damage and it escalates, it increases geometrically. I would go to Australia all the time to hang out with you guys if it weren't for two things. One, it being stupid expensive to get a flight across the Pacific. And two, the fact that it's 14 damn hours at best. Geez, I feel like a corpse wandering off of those planes. But, when I used to hop down to LA all the time, I did that every month last year. And those flights were great. It was I'd take a little nap and then I'd be in a beautiful place where the sun is shining and it's, there's no Seattle rain anymore. And that was just lovely. But unfortunately, all the cons I go to are either in Seattle, which means no travel, or they're, a minimum 4-hour flight away. And that gets me to start questioning my life choices.
Yeah, I know the feeling. I actually ironically feel like I'm getting worse at flying the more that I do it. But maybe I'm just learning my lesson. You know what I mean? Speaking of learning lessons, we've just learned recently that the SRD 5.2 for Dungeons and Dragons will be arriving today, Australia time, but not actually. It will be tomorrow, April 22nd. Wizards of the Coast put up a blog post, I guess you'd call it, an article on D&D Beyond, announcing that the SRD 5.2 will be arriving on April 22nd. SRD 5.2, for folks who may not know, is basically the outlined content that third-party publishers will be able to use to create content for the new D&D 2024 rules. Important, I think, to note, this is not superseding SRD 5.1, which was the previous SRD that outlined the content you were able to use from the 5e 2014 rules. That is still standing. And so if you want to continue to publish content for D&D 2014, you are well within your rights to still do so under either the Creative Commons or the OGL. But SRD 5.2, my understanding is it is being published explicitly under Creative Commons, not the open game license. I'm not too sure if that matters. I saw some discontination, whatever that word is. I saw some discomfort about that on Blue Sky. Some people were like, it should be under OGL and Creative Commons, not just OGL. But I don't know if that materially matters. Is it that content published under OGL, under 5.1, is not technically compatible with new content that you might publish under 5.2 because it's Creative Commons, but 5.1 also comes under Creative Commons, so you could just republish that content under Creative Commons? I'm not...
This is minutia that I can't help you with.
Yeah, I've heard people discussing it, and after about 30 seconds, my eyes glaze over. And I think for the most part, it is not that big of a deal. You literally can still put out material under both, but you need to do a little bit more work if you use the open gaming license and the 5.1 SRD, and the benefits are probably only affect that 1 out of 1,000 publishers who would be best off just doing it under Creative Commons anyway.
Right. I haven't looked into what's happening specifically, so I can't be full lawyer Dael this time. Off the top of the dome, I think the potential areas for complaint are in terms of how that impacts people who are then publishing their own game system that uses stuff from their system and how it affects the way that they license their product. There is room for that to get complicated if the original is under the Creative Commons rather than the OGL. But again, I haven't looked into it that deeply, and it's not that huge a deal. That just is the only thing that springs to mind as the place where I can imagine there might be cases for complaint.
Because Creative Commons, correct me if I'm wrong, this is my understanding, it's not a viral quote-unquote license kind of like the ORC is. It's not like if I publish something under Creative Commons myself using the content from SRD 5.2, I'm not giving implicit permission for anybody else to republish my work under Creative Commons. Is that correct? Am I understanding that correct?
It depends on a lot of things. So there are different kinds of Creative Commons licenses. So there's just free-for-all Creative Commons that is basically immediately publishing something into the public domain. There's Creative Commons attribution. There's Creative Commons, there's different variations on it, and they have their own things. And then there can be some finitudes in terms of how that downriver thing works. Pretty much what you're saying. It is not my understanding, again, without having checked up on this immediately beforehand. I don't believe that you are automatically subject to the same stuff, but you could be in terms of what stuff you're using, right? So how substantial the amount of Creative Commons stuff you're using for you to then license that stuff that came from Creative Commons wouldn't work, right? Because if I take this specific like rule or name for a thing that was published under Creative Commons and I put that thing in my product, which I'm allowed to do, licensing that undermined differently to how it was originally licensed, that's a no.
Yeah, gotcha.
So it depends on like how much you're taking from a given thing.
I'm having flashbacks, y'all. I feel like we're mid 2024 suddenly.
I'm sorry. I should have done a bunch of reading. I should have done a bunch of reading this morning.
No. That's fine. The blog article goes on to say that SRD 5.2 will continue to be regularly updated as the latest errata for D&D 2024 continues to release, which is quite interesting because as far as I was aware, 5.1 SRD kind of didn't get touched that much, if ever. I don't know if they were doing that much errata for the original rules, aside from Jeremy Crawford just kind of throwing out rulings on Twitter every now and again.
Oh, I have one point to make about the Creative Commons that they're releasing it under. It's CC BY 4.0. And these code letters have meanings, legal meanings that kind of key back to, a rule book of its own. And the fact that it means CC BY, the thing that it doesn't have that would give that sort of virality scare is SA, share alike, which means that if you publish under this license, the work you publish must also be published with a share alike clause, which is that sort of, if you publish it, anyone else can use it as long as their use falls within the terms of the Creative Commons license. That would give indie companies a bit of a heart attack because there's no way to protect their work in that case. But it does not have a share alike clause. It's CC BY 4.0. You can look up exactly what that means online. But most importantly, it means you can use what they say you can use. And that's kind of the end of it.
I'm glad you clarified that because that was my impression. But, the internet is built on people giving their impressions of things. A conversion guide is also coming for how to update rules from 2014 to 2024. That was just kind of a throwaway line within this blog article. I'm not sure if that specific purpose is for third-party publishers to be updating their content. That guide would have been real handy about 6 months ago. Am I right, Shawn?
I have no idea what you're talking about.
But it'll be super handy in future. And speaking of errata, D&D Beyond has also released another 2024 errata, which released on April 16th. These changes have been auto-applied into D&D Beyond. And as of, I believe, one errata ago, WotC have also started providing PDFs of erratas that people can download if they have physical versions of the book and want to keep those erratas kind of collected together so it's not entirely kind of trapped on D&D Beyond, if that makes sense. The changes, for the most part, looked very minor, just wording clarifications. There was an important debuff to the conjure spells, conjure elementals, conjure woodland creatures, which gave auras that did damage. Now that damage scales less.
Always the summoner. It's always the summoner.
It's almost like it's a bad
well-deserved.
idea to have spells that bring in other creatures, but nah.
Yeah, I want to weigh in on this because the group I play with includes some very sort of rules-minded players. And instantly, those conjure spells, right? These conjure spells, which are different from summon spells, summons bring in a new stat block. The conjure spells in 2024 give you this aura that anytime anyone gets damaged within it, it pings them for extra damage as your summoned fae or summoned elementals pile on, basically.
Oh, wait,
kind of like
I didn't
everybody
know this
gets.
At all.
Yeah, no, neither did I.
Completely updated the conjure spells in 2024. Like we literally were so, this can't be right. We were so bamboozled, befuddled at our table. We like ran an impromptu playtest. We're like, this is a disaster. We can't do this. And so seeing that they are getting a damage nerf feels not just correct, but inevitable. Oh, and just honestly, a good sign that Wizards is looking at the balance of the game. Like that to me is a canary in the coal mine. If they don't fix that, then they don't care. But they are fixing that, which gives me hope that they do care.
For clarity, as James just said, it's basically different versions of Spirit Guardians is how it read to me. Like an elemental Spirit Guardians, a Fae-themed Spirit Guardians, et cetera, et cetera. And then when you cast the spell at one level higher using a 4th, 5th level spell slot, whatever it happens to be, it would increase the damage by 2d whatever, d6, d8, which was huge scaling because you only had to upcast it a little bit and suddenly you were doing way more damage to X dice, X every enemy within your aura. And so that apparently was a bit oppressive. I hadn't come across it yet in my games, but good that they fixed it. I will put a link to the change log. I'm just going to put it into the Twitch chat now, but if you're watching this, it'll be somewhere around here. So you can go check that out. And speaking of patches, I just want to bring this one up. This is a little bit of this might have gotten through the sieve of news, so to speak, but I thought it was cool and interesting. Baldur's Gate 3, a little-known independent video game from 2 years ago, has just received its last content patch, Patch 8, which puts in 3 new major things. It actually puts in a lot of little things, but the 3 major kind of implementations it has, first of all, is now cross-play. So if you've been playing Baldur's Gate 3 on a PC, a Mac, an Xbox, or a PS5, and you've had a friend who's been playing on a different platform, and you want to play co-op together, you can now do that cross-platform. So if you're playing on Xbox, you can play with someone who's playing on PS5. If you're playing on PS5, you can play with someone who's playing on PC, which I think is great because that has been a barrier, I think, for some people getting to play together. Secondly, they're introducing a photo mode. That's cool. I've already seen some photos that people have taken on the Larian website. You can add post-processing settings. There's camera settings. You can turn it black and white if you want. You can add stickers for extra effects. It looks kind of cool. Dael, you just made an expression. Are you excited by that or nonplussed?
That was, I think the expression got to you delayed. I just was surprised that there was a photo mode. I hadn't heard anything about that. I was just expecting number 2 to be the subclass editions. And then it was a photo mode, and I was surprised by that.
I'm glad we're delivering news.
I am here as a receiver of news. No, I'm really looking forward to basically getting home to my beautiful computer rig and playing some more Baldur's Gate. I'm very in the mood. But I also think it's really funny. I just wanted to share that at dinner with the whole MCDM team at some point, Colville boisterously and laughingly told the story of when Ben and I were playing co-op Baldur's Gate, and I accidentally fell into a hole into a dungeon, and then everything exploded and everyone was on fire, and then it just got worse and worse and worse. And every time we tried to do something, it just got worse. So we recommend the co-op.
Baldur's Gate co-op. Turns out it's fun. And if that's not enough to convince you to return to Baldur's Gate or try it for the first time, they have also introduced, and I think this is the first time this is happening. I wanted to double check, but I couldn't confirm. But I looked through previous patches. I'm pretty sure this is the first time they're adding new subclasses, 12 new subclasses, one for each core class. The Giant Barbarian, the College of Glamour Bard, the Death Domain Cleric, the Circle of Stars Druid, the Arcane Archer Fighter, the Way of the Drunken Master Monk, Oath of the Crown Paladin, Swarmkeeper Ranger, Swashbuckler Rogue, Shadow Magic Sorcerer, Hexblade Warlock, and speaking of blades, the Blade Singer Wizard. So a lot of people, I suspect, just had their favorite 5e class added to Baldur's Gate when it might have been missing before. Is that the case for anyone here?
I love Swashbuckler Rogue, man. Swashbuckler Rogue is the best. I don't know. There's a lot of good classes in there.
So what you're saying is I should play this at some point.
Yeah, probably,
yes.
Shawn.
Yes.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Lorecast co-op.
I need to buy
That would rock so
PS5
much. A party of 4 Lorecat. That would be amazing.
I don't disagree. I think that would be a great, if Shawn's laptop can take it, I'm sure that would be a really good time. But we can also play cross-play, so I don't have to worry about having a PC copy anymore like we did previously, Dael. Now I can just play it straight from my PS5.
Exactly. Tokugawa in chat was bringing up that Arcane Archer is a famously pretty panned subclass of fighter in 5e. And it is a curious choice to me. I wonder whether Larian have made some little tweaks to the way that it works, the way that they have with a couple of the subclasses in the past.
There's definitely, and I was going to drill down, but there was other pressing news I needed to read through, but I was going to drill down in exactly what the changes were, because there are some subclasses that are basically exactly what you read on the tin from the 5th edition rules when they were originally realized. And then there are others that are apparently quite different from how they were in the game. I think Way of the Drunken Master Monk is quite different to what it was in Xanathar's Guide to Everything, I think is where that showed up. I think the Arcane Archer Fighter is different as well. I was just looking at YouTube guides, to be honest. I have played a little bit of a Death Domain Cleric. I respect Shadowheart into Death Domain Cleric, and it's kind of got like a twin spell that you can do with any necromantic spell that you cast, which I think is the Grave Domain does not typically have that. Actually, I've just realized the Death Domain and the Grave Domain are not the same thing. My whole time here.
Trick, eh?
Yeah, right. But some of these I also don't recognize. Maybe it's just because I wasn't super familiar with Tasha's, but like the Oath of Crown Paladin, I was kind of like, oh, that's cool.
That's a Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide, I'm pretty sure.
Oh, wow.
And I really like it. I kept a lot of that when I did my insane Kingsmill patch where I only kept the stuff I liked and I rewrote everything else. Oath of the Crown made it in. I called it something else, but I don't remember. But I liked it.
If we made all our own original characters to play Baldur's Gate 3 in together, this is such a dumb question. I'm just asking what D&D character we'd play. But if we, what would we play? If we were all playing Baldur's Gate in particular, right? This Mind Flayer adventure. Right. We've all got tadpoles in our heads. We're going through the story of Baldur's Gate 3. Shawn, you're just going to have to imagine what that is. What character, what class and species would we play in that game? I'll start. It would be a hard pick between Swashbuckler Rogue and Shadow Sorcerer, which is from an earlier patch.
I haven't looked at the abilities for the Shadow Sorcerer, but I love the theming of that, obviously. The Swashbuckler, I had a brief look at it because I thought about respecing Astarion into it or choosing it for his subclass in the current playthrough that I'm doing, but I ended up going Assassin instead. I think the Swashbuckler is pretty close from what I was reading to its original 5e realization. The one that's quite different that I would choose is the Hexblade Warlock. Just because I like the Warlock that you get your spells back on a short rest. Baldur's Gate has taught me from a player's perspective how precious spell slots feel when you're in a single fight and suddenly Shadowheart has to heal everyone every round just to stay in the fight. And you went through one fight and she's got no spell slots left and you're like, oh man, now I got to take a long rest. I don't want to advance the story yet. Anyway, so Hexblade, Tiefling, honestly, just because I love the art design for Tieflings in Baldur's Gate. I think they did a really fantastic job at making them look quite unique, quite hellish.
I love the ridges they have kind of along the front of their chest. That's a really cool touch.
Just a little bit less human, but a different flavor. Just a tiny little extra bit. I would go if James went Shadow Sorcerer, I would go probably like a fighter. Like keep it pretty traditional. Maybe like a I don't know, like a champion fighter. Like keep it really straightforward. And if you went for that's if you went for Swashbuckler Rogue. If you went for the Shadow Sorcerer, I would go with a bard. I'm not sure what kind, but I would go with a bard.
Kind of curious
bring some levity to the situation.
Curious how that like pattern arranges in your mind, because I thought you were going to say if James goes the Shadow Sorcerer, I'll go the Swashbuckler Bard. That's not where that went.
No.
So it feels like there's correlations.
You're going to play a grimdark character, Ben. I know that.
Yeah.
James is more of a wild card. So I gotta balance out whether I'm like face and fun or whether I'm like just playing more the mechanics. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Anyway.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I have to go a gnome monk Way of the Drunken Master. That is
Yes.
Full comedy is the only way to go. So that's where we're headed.
Shawn, if you got to play a deep gnome, Svirfneblin, because there is some fun Svirfneblin stuff in BG3.
Oh, I love me some Svirfneblin, no doubt.
Hell yeah.
What I'm going to call the episode.
Yes.
Speaking of fun things, Universal Fan Fest has revealed, this is a tiny little snapshot of news, the Xanathar puppet. We talked about this on the Lorecast a couple of months ago. They were looking for a puppeteer, speaking of puppets, actually, Dael, for what was apparently...
The spirit of puppets is upon us. It's in the zeitgeist.
Would you want to puppeteer a beholder?
Yes, of course I would. I'd be bad at it, but I would want to do it.
Would you want to puppeteer this beholder?
Oh my God, it's terrifying.
Yeah, it's huge too. I think
It's
I think
huge.
the ad was like for two. It's like a two-person
Well, of
puppeteer
course.
kind of situation.
Yeah, they just both need to have 5 arms.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Simply just.
Yeah, it looks sick. It looks heavy, as
Yeah.
they said in the
It
original
reminds me
job
of like
listing.
the Walking with Dinosaurs puppet show I went to one time. Just really big, really complicated puppets. Big fan.
You are in LA right now, Dael. Universal Studios Hollywood is right there.
Right
How
there.
could you not already be buying tickets for this?
So true. I'll get on it.
No, but real question:
Yes.
why are
We
you not
need a
going? Are you
report.
not a real D&D fan?
Wow. Wow.
Zing.
Damn, okay. I guess I'll just leave. All right, bye.
No, but as Shawn says, we need a formal report on this.
Correspondent on the street.
Yeah. Well, if you are planning to go, Dael, just so you know, the event runs from April 25th until May 18th, as Shawn said, at Universal Studios Hollywood.
Oh, hey.
Good luck to the puppeteers.
I'll book a ticket for this time next week and just tune into the Lorecast from the show.
That would be awesome.
Hey, speaking of LA events, I've got some late breaking personal news I wouldn't mind
Ooh.
sharing here on this
Oh my
Lorecast.
God.
Because I've just been announced as one of the dungeon masters for Dungeons and Cabins Round 2 up in LA this coming fall. Player signups opening mid-May, if I'm remembering correctly. I did this last year, the inaugural year of Dungeons and Cabins, which is sort of an adult summer camp, cabin camping up at Pali Retreat in the San Bernardino Mountains, just about a 2 hours drive out of Los Angeles. And oh my God, it was so much fun. We got Shawn in actually to kind of consult on the big D&D epic style final confrontation that we did at the end. I played Baba Yaga. Someone tricked my chicken-legged hut into devouring me. It was really cool. It was really sick. And Jay Pizza Beats, a regular Lorecast chat attendee, was also one of the campers at that event. It was really cool to meet JP in person, to just like be a part of this. There's something like 30 campers, 30 PCs playing at a variety of different tables. Johnny Stanton was one of our GMs that year. Cool dude, really cool dude. His wife was one of my players. She was awesome. And this year, Sammy, our chief DM, has opened it up to 2 weekends. Tokugawa asks, is it like D&D in a castle? Yeah, it is like D&D in a castle, except the bar for entry is way lower when it comes to how expensive it is. You're not going to Britain. You're not paying for a castle hotel. You're paying for cabin camping, and it all reflects that. And honestly, if I'm going to be so real, D&D Castle is fun, but I like cabin camping more. I just got to recommend you check it out. It was a ton of fun for me, and I want to share the love. I want people to come check this out.
Where should they go to check it out?
Go to dungeonsandcabins.com. It's that easy.
Wow. That's a good URL.
Check out dungeonsandcabins.com. Look at some of the photos from last year. See if it strikes your fancy. We did real archery on the archery range, which they indeed call Rivendell. The actual campground calls Rivendell. It's very cute. We played something like 4 games of D&D, one of which was a multi-table epic, just like you get at a con. There were s'mores that were cooked. There was a lot of fun sort of after hours board game playing and like hidden role game playing up in the cabins. I'm going to be friends with a lot of these campers from last year for the rest of my life. And I'd love it if you were some of them this year.
Well, speaking of camping.
Can he do it? Can he do it? Can he?
Someone who won't be sleeping overnight anymore in the Steve Jackson Games offices because they don't work there anymore.
Damn, okay.
Is Meredith Placko, if I'm pronouncing that name correctly with my heavy Australian accent, is resigning as CEO from Steve Jackson Games. If that wasn't clear enough because of the segue, I will say again, Meredith Placko is former CEO of Steve Jackson Games, just resigning after a 2-year run at the company, overseeing some lower revenue years as a result of, as Steve Jackson himself was quoted as saying, an increasingly competitive industry and market, but nevertheless, Meredith kind of overseeing the Munchkin Big Box as a backer kit, a project that made $1.3 million. Placko recently spoke about the tariffs negative effects on the games industry, especially the manufacturing of specialized components, and has chosen to leave and rejoin the company that she helped found, TurboDork. who I believe do paints and kind of hobby adjacent stuff like that. Yeah, good impact on Steve Jackson Games.
I just can't get over Turbo Dork, man. What does Turbo Dork do? What do they do over there at Turbo Dork?
They're a lot faster than Slow Dork.
Slow Dorks? Yeah.
Slow Dork. That's me.
Yeah, as I mentioned, they do kind of like miniature paints, and I think they have like a range that's not too dissimilar. So they do paintbrushes, dropper bottles. Some people prefer dropper bottles for their miniature painting because it makes it easier to get it out on the palette. Kind of accessories like that. So cool company. And yeah, I'm sure they'll be glad to have her back full time. Speaking of the industry, this is where I would put on my tie if I had one available. We're doing the weekly tariff check-in.
I can't believe you. It's just that the weekly tariff check-in started like the week I left. It's been so long and it's still going. I'm so sorry.
I am too. And for the record, I bemoaned before we were recording the episode that I am sick of this infiltrating every space of the internet. So if you just come here for your nerdy escapism, we timestamp every episode, so feel free to skip ahead. Hopefully we'll have time for a listener email at the end of this. But I thought it was important, A, to keep people informed, and B, because we were reporting on this as things were changing 2 weeks ago with Teos. I think at the time we recorded that episode, the tariffs on China from the US were something like 45%, 35% maybe. Now they're 145%, which is just like astronomically higher than back then. Things have slowed down a little bit at least. But we're also starting to see the direct effects those tariffs are having on the industry. And I just thought it was important, A, to note that for people who want to stay informed, but also to kind of demonstrate that, like, we're not being alarmist about this, right? It's not a bunch of, companies or the industry screaming about nothing. This is going to have real effects on real people. Starting off with just a couple of kind of tariff-related stories. Greater Than Games, makers of Sentinels of the Multiverse, Spirit Island, and Compile, which are all card games or board games, have unfortunately been closed down by their parent company, the Flat River Group. Creative director of Greater Than Games, Daryl Lauder, announced this via, I believe, either Twitter or Blue Sky, saying, direct quote, that it was due to the current tariff war and just the business not being tenable in the eyes of the parent company. So he and his whole team were laid off. The website still exists for selling off current stock that they have, but they just do not, it seems, have the capacity to continue to manufacture, which is a shame for them. And hoping that everybody finds their feet quickly who got left off there. Similar story, Cephalofair, makers of Gloomhaven, who folks are more likely to be familiar with, currently have $1.2 million in stock stranded in China that the company simply cannot afford to bring into the US due to tariffs. The chief operating officer, Price Johnson, spoke to CNN, in fact, stating that he'd be the first in line to support a roadmap for domestic manufacturing, but that it simply doesn't exist currently in the US for their 100% custom-made products, which they've spent 10 years developing the relationships with manufacturers in China to produce. That sucks for them. Luckily, I suppose, for the moment, Cephalofair are kind of a mid to larger size board game company, I'm assuming, based on the success of Gloomhaven. So hopefully they could weather that a little bit more, but that was a smaller company and that was their first Kickstarter and they literally could not afford to bring that into the US. That's game over, man. Game over.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully they find a way around that. But let's just... I feel like we're going to hear more and more of those sorts of stories. Japanime Games and Arcane Wonders are two other companies that have both announced price increases imminent, which is a requirement for them to offset their tariffs. Gamehole Con, which I attended last year with Dante and Shawn and a couple of other people in and around Ghostfire. I didn't know this when I was there at the time, but they offer a limited edition plushie to con-goers as part of just the convention. With part of the proceeds from sales of that plushie going to charity. Gamehole are now unsure how they're going to be able to offer that because of the price of manufacturing those plushies and then importing them into the US. At what price can they offer them to congoers that still covers the cost of manufacturing and shipping and importing and still leaves enough money there to be able to be donated to the charity? They ran sort of ran through their options, I believe, on a Facebook post saying we can either fully increase the price to make sure the charity gets the same kind of percentage or amount, increase the price a little bit so that it's still attractive for people to purchase it, but the charity gets much less. This is starting to have real world impacts, not just on board game companies, but tabletop RPG companies as well. It's being hotly debated right now whether tabletop RPGs will be exempt from tariffs or not, with their books in particular. Books, as some people have pointed out in previous discussions, are exempt from some measure of tariffs due to taxing codes. But in the past, tabletop RPG books specifically have found to be not exempt due to rulings that classified them under the tax codes of arcade, table, or parlor games because they're intended for use with games. Yeah, I don't know. Bad news all around. I've heard similar stories that the Wingspan people are in a similar situation to Cephalofair. My apologies.
Remember when the worst thing to happen to imports was the Ever Given getting stuck in the Suez Canal? And we could at least just all laugh at that boat.
Mm-hmm. Good times. Good times. I'd like to live in some precedented times again, please.
I had that exact thought the other day. Can we please have some more precedents?
Don't worry, we're building all kinds of new precedents.
I don't want them.
I'm afraid if I comment, I will get a visit from either the FCC or the law enforcement people. So
Sure.
I'm going to keep my calm, cool, collected face here.
I mean, look, yeah, in terms of the consumer side of things, I don't have a lot of... I'm just going off other podcasts that I know. Lords of War Games and Hobbies is a YouTube channel that I've been following in the last couple of months. And also Guerrilla Miniatures is another YouTube channel. They're more kind of wargaming focused, but the guys who run those channels have all worked in retail for the last 10 to 20 years. And so they bring a really good retailer perspective to this and have been talking about how, from a card game perspective in particular, some of the people they know have been caught in situations where their distributor has said, we need to charge you X amount of dollars for this stock. And the retailer has said, well, give me 20% of that because I can't afford to purchase the entirety of that stock. I need a smaller amount. And also, if the price is increased on the stock for the consumer, I can't guarantee I'm going to be able to sell it all. So retailers and small hobby shops are going to be really caught between what people are willing to pay for it at retail and what the distributors are selling it to them for, and then being able to grab their own overheads because of the need for each person along the supply chain, the hobby shop, the distributor, the importer, to be able to make a profit through that chain. More and more companies will probably be incentivized for direct sales to customers, which a lot of smaller companies do anyway, but that also is going to harm local retailers, unfortunately, because they're going to have less stock to offer to their consumers. So in terms of what folks can do, if you're outside of the US, very little. If you're inside the US, letting your congressperson know, I suppose, support where you can. I would never suggest that people spend outside of what they can. So, look out for yourself.
Let's lighten the mood. It's Estella Vin Ladris, my friend Kai Kagawa with the raiding party. Hello!
Woo! Yay!
Good to see you, Kai.
All right, let's lower the mood because Card Game Edison...
You would.
Sorry, this is just the last little bit of this news. Card Game Edison is a website that ran an industry survey, which I will put a link to that survey so that folks can read down into the details. I'm just going to brush across the top of it. The survey was conducted on April 9th to 11th, asking 62 game publishers to respond to various questions around the tariffs. Roughly 90% said that they expected consumer prices to increase due to the tariffs, which is almost all of them. If I do math. 62% said that they plan to produce fewer games, which has the direct knock-on effect of creating less work for game designers, writers, artists, graphic designers, pretty much anybody who has their work put into the creation of a new game. If companies can't guarantee that they'll be able to import and sell that game, then they're incentivized to stick to their safer titles as well, the stuff that they know kind of sells regularly. And finally, roughly 23% of respondents said that they will need to stop manufacturing games entirely, board games entirely, if these tariffs remain for the long term. So more detailed information within that article, specifically links will be in the show notes or around the place if you want to drill down more into that. But yeah, welcome to the Eldritch Tariff cast, as somebody has said in chat. All right, now let's lighten the mood. Shake all that off. We're informed. Well done, everyone. Well done. We're all informed.
Is informed.
All right, let's jump into a listener email. Dael Kingsmill, what's the email address that people need to email if they want to reach us?
Podcast@ghostfiregaming.com.
Good, you have each internalized it and passed the final test, as has Gethin, who emails regularly. And asking this week, last week we talked about how eloquent J-Craw is at presenting their games, which had Gethin reflecting on how they themselves kind of might and are a little bit at the table when GMing, when presenting descriptions. NPC dialogue, I find I can and a little bit as well. Or find like I have safe words. Indeed is one of them where I'm like agreeing with a player character where I go, indeed. But what I'm actually doing is NPC needs to think about what they're going to say back. Are there any DM tips or advice for avoiding stumbles or struggles with descriptive text?
Well, it's interesting that you bring up your words that you fall back onto a lot, Ben, because I think that is like, even when you see a person who is very eloquent and very, very good at speaking off the cuff, if you see some of the best GMs out there publicly, right? Like if we're talking about Matt Mercer, he has safe words that he falls back on all the time as his I'm thinking and, buffering, because that's what ums and ahs and all those things are. You're just buffering what you're going to say next. And it's not even a conscious thing of I need to think of what I'm saying next. It's just that's how we work. And so, see, I just did it just then. And I think that people think it's a bigger deal than it is because it's something that is in formalized, like speech competition kind of contexts. I think people really don't notice that you're doing it in actual live situations. Very rarely is it so intrusive that it's going to be disruptive and people are going to fixate on it. But if you can train yourself into one of two things, either finding those sort of safe keywords that kind of blend into the context of what you're doing and replacing your ums and ahs with those, or if you can train yourself to, instead of umming and ahhing, just not saying anything. And it kind of gives you a little bit of gravitas when you're just pausing, gathering yourself, and then moving on. I think those are the two keys in terms of like, if you really strictly just want to perform eloquence better, then I think that those are the tricks I would lean on.
Dael, I really like something you said in the middle there, which is that most people don't even notice our filler words. They don't even notice our verbal hesitation. And in fact, I want to give a piece of advice running towards the opposite end zone, which is when you read text from a book verbatim, I'm talking about box text, things deliberately made to be read aloud. One of the reasons why players often find that kind of text to be stilted or unnatural is because you change your register, not the pitch of your voice, but the register of eloquence that you speak in. And so I often, when I'm reading box text, intentionally go and sort of wave my hand and say, well, it's something like, and then I continue reading because, even having read about 8,000 boxes of box text in my DMing career, even I can't very naturally change that register, right? I am not so Jeremy Crawford-like in my regular speaking cadence that I can switch seamlessly into box text reading. That takes an unlikely level of eloquence in the English language. So do what's easier, make the hyper-eloquent stuff more ground level, more gritty, more natural, more like a Coen Brothers movie rather than a script.
My wife is a teacher, and she'll often take student teachers or teaching interns, and they will get visits from the supervisor of the college to see how the student teachers are doing. And they will sit and they will watch a student teacher teach. The student teacher will perform a terrible lesson. The students are not learning anything. Their lesson is terrible. And at the end, what will the supervising person say? I noticed that you say okay a lot. You need to really deal with that. And that will be it. And my wife will just sit there and go, what about the 27 other things that actually cause the students not to learn anything in this class? Are we not going to bring that up? That's my way of saying, are your players having fun? Are they disrupted because you might go or say a word over and over again? If not, if they're not bothered, they should be grateful that you are showing them a good time. And you do not need to. Now, if it's something that you would like to fix, then there are definite ways. Dael has already talked about slowing down, not saying anything until you know exactly what you're going to say is fine. But then, as James said, those transitions are comforting. Those transitions help people follow the flow. So you need an or an or indeed every now and then to make sure that everyone remains on the same page and is moving through the flow of information in a way that you want them to.
There's an interesting point brought up by Hannah Fallen in chat who says, and are also interesting because they're indicators that I haven't stopped speaking yet, so don't butt in at this point.
Yes.
And that function is something that you might lose. If you remove them, you might start having players jump in and think that, oh, well, now it's time for me to speak. Which, that can be fine, that can be not fine. Like there's I think it's something to not stress yourself out over, if that makes sense. You can come across as eloquent even if you and are as much as, it's language is fluid. And, even James bringing up adding in little ums and ahs into box text in order to make something seem less stilted is a powerful tool. I was talking to someone the other day who was saying that when they were studying languages and they had to, get through certain sections of exams where they had to present on a topic, they said, I would just memorize my presentation, even though it was meant to be conversational and off the cuff, because it wasn't a literal conversation. And if I just added in like ums and ahs or little stumbles here and there, it made it seem like I was doing it naturally. And that meant that I got a better score. And I thought that was really, really funny because it is absolutely like, I when I'm at my best, I'm a pretty good cold reader. I can pick up a thing that I've never read before and read it quite well. But I do that because I am doing an impression of my father, who is an award-winning orator. So it's just a very different presentation mode that you're bringing in. So I don't know. It's not like a helpful thing to say, hey, just don't stress about it. But that is my instinctive response.
Dael, this is so interesting. When it comes time for me to read things aloud, discounting D&D, anything other than D&D, when I need to speak eloquently, I mimic my dad too, right? The radio guy.
There you go. See? All you got to do is get yourself a dad who has a background.
I think, dads aside, I think this might be a legitimate piece of advice we've kind of found here, which is think of someone who inspires eloquence. Who do you picture as eloquent? Try and get yourself into their headspace, right? I know people, now that I think about this, I know people who take on at least a little bit, like the tiniest twinge of a British affect when they talk, because one of our professors in school, very eloquent guy, similar to J. Craw, never had any sort of stumbles or backfills, was a British guy. And to this day, they have this slight twinge of Anglophone speech when they're talking in that very sort of persuasive register.
John, were you thinking, what would it be like if you presented D&D like your dad?
My dad's a wonderful person. An orator, he is not. When I go to visit my family and I take my daughter, she has a hard time understanding how we speak because I switch into sort of Appalachian Southern drawl. And so I people would not be able to understand me if I started talking that way. So it made me laugh. Good stuff.
Well, look, maybe depending on where your D&D adventure is set, it might be quite immersive. You know, it might.
That's true.
That's true.
I would like to call attention to my mother using the live chat to tell me that while I'm gone, that they've taken my car because the driver's window doesn't go down. The electronics are shut. And I guess she went to get that checked, and they say it works for them, and that just makes me mad because it doesn't work.
Well, look, when you get home, if it's fixed,
I'm the one going through the drive-through and only remembering at the last second. It's me. I'm living that life.
Do you have to then step out of the car? Is that how that works?
I have to crawl forward a little bit and then open the door, and it always gives the Macca's person a laugh.
Great. Now everybody listening is wondering what a Macca's is.
Macca de Donald's.
Just to cap off, agree with everything that you all just said. I think, even when I'm presenting videos on YouTube, it's scripted. We have a teleprompter that I use, but I'm always like looking around, putting in ums and ahs, improving little bits in here and there, which, much to Dante's chagrin, they sometimes work, they sometimes don't, and need to be heavily edited around. But it's intended to make it seem more casual, more flowing, more easy to engage in. And also, don't judge yourself too harshly. I think I agree, James. Find someone who maybe you aspire to, you want to adopt some of their speech. Read a lot. If you read a lot, I think you can grow your vocabulary. Actually, my wife was telling me that there's research that suggests that reading a lot alone does not necessarily grow your vocabulary, but I disagree with her, but I'm not researched, so who knows? But I think reading helps, but don't judge yourself too harshly. I was playing Baldur's Gate in bed the other night on my Steam Deck, and my wife just commented on how good the narrator is. And I was like, yeah, the narrator is good. Be kind to yourself. Don't compare yourself to the Baldur's Gate narrator. She is very good. Anyway, speaking of things that are very good, hopefully this podcast was. And if you think so too, you can give us likes and thumbs and stars and stuff by clicking the thingies that are down below, or they might be somewhere else.
And stars and stuff. That's fun.
You enjoy that chant?
And stars and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, great. All right, well, that's the new thing. Make sure you tell everybody. Likes and thumbs and stars and stuff. And also subscribes and whatever else your platform craves, we do too. This has been the Eldritch Lorecast. My name's been Ben Byrne. I'm here with Dael Kingsmill, James Haig, Shawn Merwin every week, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 4 p.m. Pacific on a Monday, and that is 9 a.m. on a Tuesday if you're in the Australian Eastern Time Zone. And we will catch you next week for another episode of the Eldritch Lorecast.
Good luck, Dante, syncing all these clicking when we're all...
Yeah, this is probably really annoying to listen to. Why? Why did he start doing that? Yeah, cool, anyway.